5 months pregnant on Easter morning, she found the two people she trusted most standing too close with a secret between them. Before we begin, I want you to hold on to something. The people who hurt us most aren't strangers. They're the ones who know exactly where we're soft, because we showed them. And that's not a reason to stop being soft. That's a reason to choose more carefully who gets to touch you there. Remember that. You're going to need it. Monroe Westfield, Easter Sunday, 5:47 a.m. The kind of morning that arrives with pale gold light and the smell of something sweet baking somewhere. Monroe's kitchen, her house, the brownstone and Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, that her husband bought the week after their wedding. Monroe woke up early because the baby woke up early. 5 months. A boy. They didn't have a name yet because Marcello insisted that names carried destiny, and he refused to choose one before he held his son's face in his hands. Romantic, dramatic. That was Marcello Valenti. Monroe pulled on a robe, barefoot on cold hardwood. The house was quiet the way houses are quiet on holidays, holding its breath, waiting for the noise to begin. She was supposed to be setting up the Easter brunch. Deviled eggs, fresh bread, the honey-glazed ham she'd been brining since Thursday. Marcello's family would arrive by noon. Cousins, uncles, associates who weren't really associates but never got called what they actually were. Monroe reached the top of the stairs and stopped. Voices. From the kitchen, low, layered, the kind of conversation that isn't meant to travel beyond the two people having it. She recognized both voices immediately, Marcello and her sister, Tatum Westfield. Monroe descended 3 steps, slowly. The wood didn't creak because Marcello had every floorboard in this house replaced with Italian walnut during the renovation. Silent floors. She'd thought it was aesthetic. Now she wondered if it was strategic. From the 4th step, she could see through the banister into the kitchen. Tatum stood by the counter, close to Marcello, closer than a sister-in-law should stand at 5:47 in the morning when the wife is upstairs sleeping. Marcello's hand was on Tatum's arm. Not gripping, resting. The way you touch someone when you've touched them before. When the geography of their body isn't new territory. Tatum's head was tilted up, listening. Yet her eyes locked on his face with an intensity Monroe had never seen her sister direct at anyone, not even the men she'd dated. And Marcello was speaking, low enough that Monroe caught only fragments. Can't keep meeting like this. She's going to... I know what I'm doing. Trust me. The baby changes everything. You understand that? Monroe's hand found the banister, squeezed until her knuckles went white. The baby changes everything. Her baby, their baby, the boy growing inside her body while her husband stood in their kitchen on Easter morning, touching her sister like a secret he'd been keeping for God knows how long. Monroe wanted to scream, wanted to descend those stairs like a hurricane and split that kitchen in half with her voice. But something held her. Not fear, not weakness, instinct. The same instinct that told her when to leave a room, when to stop asking questions, when the answer she was about to receive would be worse than the question she'd asked. She retreated. 1 step, 2. Back to the hallway, back to the bedroom. Closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, pressed both hands against her belly and felt her son shift, oblivious, innocent, growing inside a woman whose entire world had just tilted sideways. 5 minutes passed. Maybe 10. Then the bedroom door opened. Marcello, dressed, calm, carrying coffee. "Happy Easter," he said. Smiled, kissed her forehead, set the mug on the nightstand. "You're up early," Monroe said. Testing. Couldn't sleep, started prepping the kitchen. "Alone?" The slightest pause. Half a breath, maybe less. "Yeah, just me," he lied, standing in their bedroom. On Easter Sunday. Looking at his pregnant wife, he lied. And Monroe did something she'd never done before in 4 years of marriage. She lied back. "Sounds nice," she said. "I'll be down in a minute." Marcello left. The door clicked shut. Monroe stared at the coffee. Steam curling, rising, disappearing. She didn't know what she'd just seen. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was going to find out. Now, quick question. Have you subscribed? If you haven't, listen. This story is about to take you somewhere you're not expecting. And if you're not subscribed, you're going to miss what comes next. Hit that button. Join the family. You won't regret it. 2 years earlier. Monroe Westfield didn't believe in love at first sight. She believed in love at first argument. She met Marcello Valenti at a charity auction in Manhattan. Black tie, November. A room full of people pretending to care about underfunded schools while competing over who could spend the most on a painting they'd never hang. Monroe was there because she ran the nonprofit hosting the event, Westfield Education Initiative. 7 years of her life poured into after-school programs for kids in Brownsville and East New York. She wore a borrowed dress. Her heels were from a consignment shop. She didn't belong in this room, and she knew it. Marcello was there because his family donated $200,000 annually to causes that made their last name appear in favorable light. He bid $60,000 on a watercolor of the Brooklyn Bridge. Monroe walked up to him afterward. You know that painting is worth about $400, she said. He looked at her. Dark eyes, unhurried. The kind of face that looked like it had been carved by someone who understood patience. I wasn't buying the painting, he said. Then what were you buying? A reason to talk to the woman who's been glaring at everyone in this room for the last hour. I wasn't glaring. You were absolutely glaring. Monroe laughed. The real kind. Unguarded. Unexpected. And Marcello Valenti, a man who controlled conversations the way conductors control orchestras, looked genuinely surprised. That surprise became dinner. Dinner became 3 months of arguments about everything: politics, pasta, the ethical responsibilities of inherited wealth. They disagreed constantly, passionately, loudly, but Monroe had never felt more heard in her life. They married in September. Small ceremony. His family filled one side of the church. Her side had Tatum, their mother Colleen, and 11 friends who actually showed up. Marcello's world was vast, complicated, populated by men with heavy handshakes and women who wore silence like designer gowns. His family operated in construction and shipping, legitimate on the surface, but Monroe noticed things: phone calls taken in other rooms, meetings that started at midnight. A cousin named Benedetto Valenti, who carried a presence that made everyone around him speak softer, move slower, choose words more carefully. Monroe asked once, early in the marriage, over breakfast, "What does your family actually do?" Marcello set down his coffee, looked at her with eyes that held both love and a boundary she could feel. "We build things," he said, "and we protect what we build." She didn't ask again. Here's something I want you to sit with. In relationships, we often accept incomplete answers because the complete ones might require us to change, to leave, to confront something we're not ready for. And so we choose the version of truth that lets us stay comfortable. That's not weakness, it's human. But comfort and safety are not the same thing. Now let me tell you about Tatum, Monroe's younger sister by 14 months. If Monroe was a straight line, direct, purposeful, efficient, Tatum was a spiral, beautiful, unpredictable. The kind of woman who could charm a room in 5 minutes and disappear from it without anyone noticing when she left. They were close, fiercely close. While the kind of sisterhood forged in a household where the father drank and the mother worked doubles, and the two girls learned early that the only reliable safety net was each other. Tatum was Monroe's maid of honor. Threw the bridal shower, cried during the vows, hugged Marcello afterward and whispered something in his ear that made him nod seriously. What did she say? Monroe asked later. She said if I ever hurt you, she'd burn my life to the ground. That sounds like Tatum. I believed her. But Tatum had shadows Monroe couldn't reach. Periods of disappearance, weeks where phone calls went unanswered, texts returned days late with vague explanations. Work trip, needed space. I'm fine, stop worrying. Tatum worked in consulting, or so she said. Corporate strategy for mid-size firms. She traveled constantly. Had clients she never named. Maintained a schedule that seemed designed to prevent anyone from pinning her down. Monroe worried. But Tatum always resurfaced. Always came back with a gift, an apology, a smile bright enough to make you forget the absence. That was Tatum's superpower, making you forget what you should remember. When Monroe announced the pregnancy, Tatum flew in from Chicago that same night. She arrived at the brownstone at 11 p.m., brought a stuffed elephant the size of a toddler, held Monroe's face in both hands. "You're going to be the best mother," Tatum said. "This baby is going to be so loved." Monroe believed her. Completely. What she didn't notice was the look Tatum exchanged with Marcello over her shoulder. Quick, loaded, gone before Monroe turned around, a look that said the timeline just changed. And meanwhile, inside the Valenti operation, pressure was building. Benedetto, Marcello's cousin and underboss, had flagged irregularities. Shipping manifests that didn't match. Information leaking to the Ferrante family, a rival organization based in Philadelphia that had been encroaching on Valenti territory for months. Someone inside the Valenti circle was feeding the Ferrante's intelligence, a spy. And Marcello had a suspicion about who it was, a suspicion he couldn't share with Monroe. Because the suspect walked into their home freely, hugged his wife like family, brought stuffed elephants for his unborn son. The suspect was Tatum Westfield, and Easter morning was 3 months away, 6 weeks before Easter. Late February, Monroe found the burner phone on a Wednesday. Not Marcello's main phone, the one he used openly. The one with photos of her ultrasound as the lock screen. The one he left on the kitchen counter like it had nothing to hide. This was a different phone. Black. No case. Tucked inside the lining of his leather travel bag, the one he took to overnight meetings in Atlantic City once or twice a month. Monroe wasn't searching for it. She was searching for her passport. They had a baby moon planned for Bermuda in April, and she'd slipped her passport into one of his bags months ago for safekeeping. Her fingers found glass where laminated paper should have been. She held the phone, felt its weight, light, disposable. The kind of phone that existed for one purpose, communication that couldn't be traced. It was locked. 6-digit passcode. Monroe tried his birthday. Wrong. Her birthday, wrong. Their wedding date, wrong. Yeah, she didn't try again. 3 failed attempts, and the phone would lock permanently or wipe. She knew this because she'd watched enough crime documentaries to understand how disposable phones worked. She put it back. Exact position. Exact angle. Then she sat on the bedroom floor for 20 minutes. 5 months pregnant. Hands on the carpet. Mind racing. A second phone. Hidden in a bag he took to meetings she wasn't invited to. Every wife who's ever found a second phone knows the arithmetic. The equation writes itself. Secret device plus hidden conversations equals a truth you're not ready for. But Monroe wasn't every wife, and Marcello wasn't every husband. Let me tell you something that might save you one day. When you discover a secret, you have 2 choices. React immediately and give the other person time to build a better lie. Or wait, and give yourself time to build a complete picture. Patience isn't passive. Sometimes patience is the most aggressive thing you can do. Monroe chose patience. She started watching. Not obsessively, strategically. The way Marcello watched rooms, absorbing details without appearing to look. First, his schedule. She mapped it. Tuesdays and Thursdays, he left the house by 7 and returned after 10. He said these were operations meetings with Benedetto. Monroe texted Benedetto's wife, Ginevra, casually, asked how she was, asked if the men were working them too hard this week. Ginevra responded, "What meetings? Benny's been home every Tuesday and Thursday this month. We're doing a puzzle. 2,000 pieces. It's killing me. No meetings." Marcello was somewhere else on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And he was using his cousin as an alibi without the cousin's wife knowing. Second detail, Tatum. Monroe scrolled back through her text history with her sister. Noticed a pattern she'd missed before. Every time Marcello had an overnight meeting in Atlantic City, Tatum was unreachable. Same nights, same windows of silence, like 2 schedules synced to avoid detection. Coincidence? Maybe. Monroe didn't believe in coincidence anymore. The third detail was the worst. A Saturday afternoon, Marcello was in the shower. His main phone buzzed on the nightstand. Monroe glanced at it. The notification was from an encrypted messaging app, the same minimalist interface she'd seen once before when Marcello accidentally opened it in front of her and closed it immediately. The preview showed one line before disappearing. TW, package confirmed. Thursday works, same location. TW Tatum Westfield. Monroe's blood went cold, not from jealousy, from recognition. Package, location, confirmation. This wasn't the language of an affair. Affairs used different words: miss you, need you, can't wait. This was operational, clinical, which meant one of two things. Either Marcello and Tatum were involved in something romantic and communicating in code to hide it, or they were involved in something else entirely. Something that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with the world Marcello kept behind closed doors. Monroe didn't know which option was worse. She called Jessamine. No, she didn't have a Jessamine. Monroe Westfield had one person she trusted outside of Tatum and Marcello. One friend who existed beyond the orbit of the Valenti family. Persephone Drake. A former college roommate, current criminal defense attorney in Newark, sharp enough to cut glass with a question, loyal enough to bury a body with a follow-up question. Monroe called her that night. From the bathroom. Shower running. Marcello asleep, or pretending to be. I need your help, Monroe whispered. What kind of help? The kind where you don't ask questions until I'm finished talking. Persephone was quiet for 2 seconds, then, talk. Monroe told her everything. The phone, the schedule, the text from Tatum, the lies about meetings with Benedetto. When she finished, Persephone asked one question. What do you want to do? I want to know the truth. The whole truth? Because the whole truth about a man like Marcello Valenti might include things you can't unknow. Monroe pressed her hand against her belly. The baby shifted. A slow roll, settling. I have a child growing inside me, Monroe said. And I don't know if his father is a cheater, a criminal, or both. So, yes, the whole truth. Whatever it costs. Then we work smart, Persephone said. And we work quiet. Give me until Easter. Easter. 5 weeks away. Monroe hung up, turned off the shower, walked back to bed, lay down next to a man made of secrets, and began counting the days. March, 5 weeks before Easter. Persephone Drake worked fast and quiet. Two qualities that made her a devastating attorney and an even more dangerous friend. Within 72 hours, she'd pulled public records on every shell company connected to the Valenti family. Cross-referenced Marcello's travel patterns with hotel bookings in Atlantic City. Lau flagged 3 properties leased under names that didn't exist 6 months ago. She delivered her findings over lunch at a diner in Hoboken. Neutral territory. No Valenti eyes. Monroe sat across from her. Decaf coffee. Untouched turkey sandwich. 5 months pregnant and running on adrenaline and fear. Here's what I found, Persephone said. Opened a folder. Marcello doesn't go to Atlantic City for meetings. He goes to a warehouse in Port Newark, leased under a company called Adriatic Logistics, LLC. What happens at the warehouse? I don't know yet, but the lease was signed 4 months ago, around the same time your sister started going dark on those same nights. Monroe stared at the folder. You think they're meeting there? I think something is happening there that involves both of them. Whether it's personal or professional, I can't tell yet. Persephone closed the folder. But there's something else. She pulled out a second sheet, a printout from a public court database. Tatum Westfield filed a DBA 18 months ago. Business name, Eastline Strategic Consulting. Listed address, a P.O. box in Philadelphia. Philadelphia? Philadelphia, which is interesting because the Ferrante family operates out of Philadelphia. Persephone raised an eyebrow. How do you know that name? I'm married to Marcello Valenti. I don't ask questions, but I'm not deaf. The Ferrantes come up in whispered conversations that stop when I walk into the room. Let me interrupt here, because I need you to understand what's forming. Monroe isn't just uncovering an affair. She's standing at the edge of something much larger. Something that connects her sister, her husband, and a rival crime family in a web that she's been living inside without knowing. And the most dangerous part? She's pregnant. Every decision she makes now carries double weight. Her life and her son's life measured on the same scale. If you're following this story and feeling that tightness in your chest, Good. That means you're paying attention. Drop a comment and tell me what you think is really happening. I read every single one. Monroe went home that evening and performed the role of happy wife with surgical precision. Cooked dinner. Laughed at Marcello's story about a contractor who poured a foundation 6 inches off center. Watched him pour wine for himself and sparkling water for her. Let him rub her feet on the couch while a movie played that neither of them watched. And that she studied him the way she used to study grant proposals, looking for what was missing, not what was present. And she found it. His phone, the main one. He'd started carrying it differently. Screen always facing down. Taking it to the bathroom. Sleeping with it under his pillow instead of on the nightstand. Small changes. The kind only a wife would notice. The kind that meant the walls were getting higher. Week 2, mid-March. Tatum resurfaced. She appeared at Monroe's door on a Saturday morning with shopping bags and a smile wide enough to cover whatever she was hiding. Baby clothes, Tatum announced. I went insane at this boutique in Soho. You're going to die. Monroe let her in. Made tea. Yet sat on the couch while Tatum spread tiny outfits across the cushions, sailboats and dinosaurs, and a onesie that said, Mama's favorite, in gold letters. Normal sister behavior. Perfect sister behavior. Too perfect. Monroe watched Tatum's hands. Steady. Practiced. The hands of a woman who'd learned to perform calmness under pressure. How's work? Monroe asked. Busy? New client in... Tatum paused. A fraction of a second. Boston. Not Philadelphia, Boston. Monroe noted the hesitation. Filed it. And how's Marcello treating you? Tatum asked. Redirecting. Smooth. Like a queen. Good, he'd better. That man worships you, Monroe. Don't ever doubt that. The words landed strangely. Not like reassurance, like instruction. Don't ever doubt that. Why would Tatum need to tell her not to doubt her own husband, unless there was something to doubt? Week 3, late March. Benedetto Valenti invited Monroe to Sunday dinner at his home, without Marcello, who was away on business in Newark. This was unusual. Benedetto was warm but formal. Family dinners happened on holidays. Random Sunday invitations didn't. Monroe accepted. Benedetto's brownstone and Bensonhurst smelled like rosemary and red sauce. Ginevra seated Monroe at the kitchen table, fed her stuffed shells, fussed over her belly. After dinner, Ginevra cleared the dishes and left the room. Benedetto sat across from Monroe, folded his hands, the gesture of a man about to say something carefully. How much do you know about what Marcello does? He asked. Enough to know not to ask. That was smart. No, before. Benedetto's eyes held something Monroe hadn't seen in them before. Concern. Real concern. Not performative. But things have changed. Changed how? There's a situation inside the family. A leak. Someone has been passing information to the Ferrantes for over a year. Shipping routes, meeting locations, financial structures. Monroe's pulse quickened. Why are you telling me this? Because Marcello won't. And because the person we suspect... Benedetto stopped, looked at his hands, then back at Monroe. The person we suspect is someone close to you. The kitchen went silent. The clock on the wall ticked. The baby kicked. Who? Monroe whispered. Benedetto held her gaze. Your sister, Monroe. We believe Tatum is working for the Ferrante family. The words landed like stones dropped into deep water, sinking, spreading, reaching places Monroe didn't know existed inside her. Tatum, her sister, her safety net, the girl who held her hand during their father's worst nights, the woman who threatened to burn Marcello's life down if he ever hurt her, working for a rival family, spying on the Valentis, using Monroe as her way in. Monroe drove home in silence, hands tight on the steering wheel, mind rebuilding every conversation, every absence, every perfectly timed reappearance her sister had made over the last year. The shopping trips, the baby clothes, the late-night phone calls where Tatum asked casual questions. How's Marcello's week been? Any big projects coming up? Is he traveling soon? Questions Monroe had answered without thinking. Because why would you guard your words against your own sister? Unless your own sister was the weapon pointed at your family. Late March, 11 days before Easter. Monroe didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed next to Marcello, eyes open, ceiling dark, the baby pressing against her bladder like even he knew something was wrong and wanted her alert. Tatum? A spy? Working for the Ferrantes? Every time Monroe closed her eyes, the evidence reassembled itself behind her eyelids. The Philadelphia business registration, the synchronized disappearances, the casual questions about Marcello's schedule disguised as sisterly interest, and Benedito's face when he told her. Not angry, not accusatory, concerned, like a man delivering a terminal diagnosis to someone he cared about. By 4 a.m., Monroe made a decision. She wasn't going to investigate anymore. She was going to confront. Now she waited until morning. Marcello's routine was precise: wake at 6, shower, espresso at the kitchen island, phone calls by 7. Monroe intercepted him between the espresso and the phone calls. Sit down, she said. Marcello looked at her, read something in her face that made him set the cup down without questioning. He sat. Monroe stood, deliberately. She needed the height, needed to feel like she was the one controlling this conversation. I know about the leak, she said. I know someone inside the family is feeding information to the Ferrantes, and I know you suspect Tatum. Marcello's expression didn't change. Not a flinch, not a blink. The stillness of a man who'd trained himself to absorb shocks without showing damage. Who told you? He asked. Does it matter? It matters because that information is dangerous. Monroe. Knowing it puts you in danger? I'm already in danger. I've been in danger since I married you. The difference is now I know it. Silence. 10 seconds, 15. Then Marcello did something Monroe didn't expect. He opened a drawer in the kitchen island, pulled out a folder. Thick, worn at the edges, placed it on the counter between them. 6 months, he said. I've known for 6 months. Monroe stared at the folder. Known what exactly? That Tatum has been working for Nicodemo Ferrante since before our wedding. The words hit Monroe's chest like a freight train wrapped in her sister's perfume. Before the wedding. Not months. Years. Tatum had been embedded in Monroe's life, in Marcello's orbit, as a Ferrante asset since before Monroe said I do. Open the folder, Marcello said. Monroe opened it. And inside, surveillance photographs. Tatum entering a restaurant in South Philadelphia with a man Monroe didn't recognize. Tatum in a parking garage exchanging an envelope with a woman in a dark coat. Tatum sitting in a car outside the Port Newark warehouse, the same warehouse Persephone had flagged, talking on a phone that wasn't her regular one. Her own sister, her own blood. Photographed like a criminal because she was one. The man in the restaurant is Salvatore Ferrante, Nicodemo's nephew. He runs their intelligence operations. Marcello's voice was flat, controlled, delivering facts like autopsy results. Tatum has been reporting to him for approximately 2.5 years. She provides shipping schedules, meeting locations, and financial projections. How does she get the information? Marcello looked at her. And for the first time, something cracked behind his eyes. From you, Monroe. She gets it from you. Stop. I need you to feel what Monroe just felt. Because this is the kind of pain that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't scream. It just sits in your chest like concrete hardening, heavy, permanent, impossible to breathe around. Her sister weaponized their relationship. Every phone call, every visit, every casual question over brunch. It was all collection, all intelligence gathering. And Monroe, trusting, loyal, wide-open Monroe, had been the pipeline. Not because she was stupid, because she loved without suspicion. And someone exploited that. If you've ever discovered that your openness was used against you, comment below. One word, just one. I'll know what it means. Why didn't you tell me? Monroe's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. Because telling you would have changed your behavior. If you suddenly stopped sharing details with Tatum, she'd know we were onto her. She'd disappear, burn her contacts, and we'd lose our only chance to identify the full Ferrante network inside our operation. So you used me. I protected the operation. You used me, Marcello. You watched my sister sit on our couch and hold baby clothes against my stomach, and you knew she was reporting everything back to people who want to destroy your family. Our family. Marcello stood, moved toward her. Monroe stepped back. Don't, she said. Don't touch me right now. He stopped, hands at his sides. A man who controlled an empire standing powerless in his own kitchen because the one person whose permission he needed had just revoked it. The burner phone, Monroe said. The meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the warehouse in Newark, that's all part of this. Counter surveillance, tracking Tatum's movements, building a case against the Ferrantes. And Easter? Benedetto said something is happening at Easter. Marcello's jaw tightened, the first visible crack. Easter is when we close the trap. What trap? Tatum is expecting a major shipment manifest from the family. I've been feeding her false information for 3 months, through you. Every detail you've casually mentioned to her has been engineered. Fake routes, fake schedules, fake financial data. Monroe's stomach dropped. You turned my conversations with my sister into disinformation. I turned them into a weapon that will expose every Ferrante contact inside our organization. And me? What am I in this plan, Marcello? He didn't answer. Say it. You're the delivery mechanism, the channel. The reason Tatum believes the information is real because it comes from someone who doesn't know it's fake. Bait. Monroe was bait. Her husband had turned her into bait without her knowledge, without her consent, while she carried their son. Monroe picked up the folder, held it against her chest. I'm taking this, she said, and I'm going to Persephone's. Monroe, you have until Easter to finish whatever this is. And then you're going to sit in front of me and explain every single decision you made, starting with the one where you decided your pregnant wife was an acceptable pawn in your war. She walked out, didn't look back. All the front door closed behind her like a period at the end of a sentence Marcello couldn't rewrite. Late March, 9 days before Easter. Persephone's apartment in Newark was small, clean, and ruthlessly organized. Law books on every shelf, case files sacked by urgency, a kitchen that smelled like black coffee and discipline. Monroe sat on the guest bed, folder in her lap, door closed. 5 months pregnant and feeling like the loneliest woman in the tri-state area. She hadn't cried yet. That's what surprised her most. The tears were there. She could feel them stacked behind her eyes like traffic on the turnpike. But they wouldn't move. Something was blocking them. Anger, that's what it was. Anger so dense it had its own gravity. Not at Tatum. Not yet. That pain was too deep to access, like a wound buried under surgical gauze that she wasn't ready to unwrap. At Marcello. Because Tatum's betrayal was comprehensible. Tatum had always been a spiral, unpredictable, secretive, drawn to darkness like a moth to something it couldn't name. Monroe could trace the logic even if she couldn't forgive it. But Marcello, her husband, the man who read Dostoevsky in the rain, who pressed his ear against her belly every night and whispered to their son in Italian, who swore on their wedding day that he would never let anything touch her. He'd turned her into a weapon, aimed her at her own sister, and smiled at her across the dinner table while the operation ran through her bloodstream like poison she couldn't taste. That was the betrayal Monroe couldn't metabolize. Persephone knocked at 10 p.m. You need to eat. I'm not hungry. I didn't ask if you were hungry. I said you need to eat. There are 2 of you in there. Persephone opened the door, held out a plate, grilled chicken, rice, steamed broccoli. Eat. Then we talk. Monroe ate. Mechanically. Each bite a conscious decision rather than a desire. Then they talked. Walk me through the folder, Persephone said. Cross-legged on the floor, legal pad on her knee. Monroe opened it, spread the contents across the bed. Surveillance photos, timeline documents, communication intercepts, a detailed map of Tatum's movements over 18 months. Marcello has been running a counterintelligence operation against my sister, Monroe said, feeding her false information through me. Using our conversations as a disinformation pipeline. Without your knowledge. Without my consent. Persephone wrote something on the legal pad, underlined it twice, said, "And Easter? He's closing the trap. Whatever false information Tatum has passed to the Ferrantes, they're going to act on it. And when they do, Marcello's people will be waiting." Which means Tatum gets caught in the middle. Yes. What happens to her when she gets caught? Monroe's hand stopped mid-page. She hadn't asked that question, hadn't let herself think it, because the answer lived in a place she wasn't ready to visit. "I don't know," Monroe whispered. "Yes, you do." Here's the dark truth about loyalty in a world like Marcello's. Spies don't get trials. They don't get attorneys. They don't get second chances. In the world Monroe married into, the world she chose not to examine too closely, betrayal is answered with finality. Tatum wasn't just going to be exposed. She was going to be eliminated. And Monroe's husband was orchestrating it. The phone rang at midnight. Monroe looked at the screen. Tatum, her sister, calling from whatever shadow she currently occupied. The sister who'd braided her hair when they were 7. Who'd held her during their father's worst rages. Who'd stood in a church and promised to protect Monroe's happiness. The sister who'd sold that happiness to the Ferrantes for reasons Monroe still didn't understand. She answered. "Hey, Ro." Tatum's voice. Warm, familiar, devastating. "I've been trying to reach you. Marcello said you're staying with a friend for a few days? He told you that?" He sounded worried. "Is everything okay? Is the baby okay?" The performance, flawless. Every note calibrated. Concern, love, sisterly devotion. If Monroe hadn't seen the photographs, hadn't read the intercepts, hadn't watched her entire reality disassemble over the last 48 hours, she would have believed every word. That's what made it unbearable. Tatum wasn't bad at pretending. She was extraordinary at it, which meant Monroe had no way of knowing where the pretending started. Was their entire sisterhood a cover? Was every "I love you" a data collection exercise? Had Tatum ever even once been real with her? "I'm fine," Monroe said. "Just needed space." From Marcello? From everything. Silence on the line. Then Tatum said something that cracked Monroe's armor like a hammer against ice. "Whatever you're going through, I'm here. You know that. Right? I'm always here for you, Ro, no matter what." Monroe hung up, set the phone on the nightstand, and finally cried. The tears came hard, the kind that doesn't make sound, just pressure, waves, a body releasing what the mind can no longer hold. She cried for the sister she'd lost, not to death, but to something worse. To choice. Tatum chose the Ferrantes, chose deception, chose to turn their bond into a tool. She cried for the husband who loved her enough to build an empire around her safety, but not enough to tell her the truth. She cried for the baby, the boy who would arrive in 4 months into a family fractured in ways she didn't know how to repair. At 2 a.m., Monroe picked up the folder again, wiped her face, forced herself to read every page she'd skipped earlier. And on the last page, a document she hadn't noticed, she found the detail that made everything worse. A communication intercept dated 2 weeks ago. Tatum to Salvatore Ferrante. TW, she's 5 months. Due in August. Once the baby is born, my access increases. Marcello will trust me with the child. That's when we move on the next phase. SF. The child is the leverage point. Confirmed. Monroe read it 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. Her baby. Her unborn son. Tatum wasn't just spying on the family. She was positioning herself to use Monroe's child as leverage in the next phase of the Ferrante operation. Her sister was planning to weaponize her baby. Monroe closed the folder, placed both hands on her belly, and made a decision that would change everything. She was done running, done hiding, done being the one who didn't know. Easter was 9 days away, and Monroe Westfield was going to be ready. April, 6 days before Easter. Monroe woke up at 5 a.m. with clarity so sharp it almost hurt. She'd spent 3 days at Persephone's, 3 days grieving, 3 days processing the impossible mathematics of her life. Husband who used her, sister who sold her, baby who was being calculated into someone else's equation. 3 days was enough. Monroe Westfield was not a woman who lived on the floor. She'd grown up in a house where the floor meant danger, where her father's rages sent her and Tatum crawling to corners, hiding behind furniture, making themselves small enough to survive. She'd sworn at 16 that she would never make herself small again, and she wasn't about to start now. She called Marcello at 5:17 a.m. Yet he answered on the first ring. Hadn't been sleeping. She could hear it in his voice, the rawness of a man who'd been sitting in silence with his own destruction for 3 days. "I'm coming home," Monroe said. "Monroe, I'm not finished. I'm coming home, but the rules have changed." Silence, waiting. Marcello knew when to listen. It was the one quality she still respected. "I found the last page of your folder, the intercept between Tatum and Salvatore Ferrante, the one about the baby." She heard his breathing change, sharper, caught. "You knew they were planning to use our son as leverage, and you still didn't tell me. I was going to neutralize the threat before—" Before what? Before I found out that my sister views my child as a chess piece? Before I discovered that the two most important people in my life were running operations around my body without my permission?" Monroe stood at Persephone's window. Newark skyline. Gray morning. The kind of light that doesn't beautify anything, just shows you exactly what's there. "Here's what's going to happen, Marcello. I'm coming back. And I'm not coming back as the wife who doesn't know. I'm not coming back as the channel or the pipeline or the delivery mechanism. I'm coming back as your partner. Monroe, this is dangerous. Everything about our marriage has been dangerous. The difference is you knew and I didn't. That ends today." She heard him exhale. Long, controlled. The sound of a man releasing the illusion that he could manage this alone. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want in, full briefing. Every detail of the Easter operation, and I want a seat at the table when you plan it." "You're 5 months pregnant." "I'm aware of what I am. I'm also the only person Tatum trusts completely, which means I'm the only person who can get close enough to finish this without bloodshed." Let me pause here because this moment matters. There's a difference between being brave and being reckless. Brave is walking into danger with your eyes open because the alternative, ignorance, is more dangerous. Reckless is walking in blind. Monroe wasn't being reckless. She was being strategic. She understood something Marcello hadn't calculated, that a woman who knows she's being used is infinitely more powerful than a woman who doesn't. That's not just a story lesson, that's a life lesson. Yet the moment you stop being the person things happen to and start being the person who decides what happens next, everything shifts. Monroe arrived at the brownstone at noon. Marcello was waiting. Not in the kitchen, not performing normalcy. He was in the basement office, the room Monroe had never been invited into. The room with the reinforced door and the phone jammer, and the walls that absorbed sound like confession booths. He'd opened it for her. Literally. The door stood wide. Inside, Benedetto, already seated, and a woman Monroe had never seen before. "This is Celestina Valenti," Marcello said. "My aunt. She runs our intelligence operations from Philadelphia." Celestina was 60, silver hair cropped short, eyes that processed information the way scanners process documents, completely, instantly, without sentiment. "Nah, I've heard about you," Celestina said. "You're smarter than my nephew deserves." "I know," Monroe said. Sat down, placed her hands on the table. "Brief me." For the next 2 hours, Monroe learned the full architecture of the Easter operation. Code name, Resurrection. Because of course it was. The plan was layered, precise, built over 6 months of patience and false information. Phase 1, already complete. Monroe had unknowingly fed Tatum fabricated shipping manifests showing a massive cargo delivery arriving at Port Newark on Easter Sunday. High-value goods. The kind of shipment the Ferrantes would commit resources to intercept. Phase 2, Tatum would pass this information to Salvatore Ferrante, who would position his people at the port. Expecting a vulnerable target. expecting the Valentis to be distracted by holiday celebrations. By phase 3, the port would be empty. No shipment, no cargo. Instead, Marcello's people would document every Ferrante operative who showed up, faces, vehicles, communications, building an irrefutable case that would be delivered to a federal contact who owed the Valentis a significant favor. The Ferrantes wouldn't be destroyed by violence, they'd be destroyed by evidence, handed to the FBI on Easter Monday like a gift basket wrapped in federal indictments. And Tatum? Monroe asked. The room went quiet. That's the part we haven't resolved, Benedetto admitted. Because she's my sister. Because she's your sister, Marcello confirmed. And because I won't make that decision without you. Not anymore. Monroe looked at him, searched his face for performance, for management, what for the strategic calm that had defined every interaction since she'd discovered the truth. She found something different. Fear. The genuine kind. The kind that lives in a man who realizes he almost lost the only person who makes his empire worth having. I have a condition, Monroe said. Name it. Tatum doesn't get hurt, she gets exposed, she gets cut off, she faces consequences. But she walks away breathing. The Ferrantes won't offer her the same courtesy once they realize she's been compromised. Then we protect her from them, too. Marcello studied her. The woman he'd married. The woman he'd underestimated. The woman who was rewriting his operation from a folding chair in his basement while carrying his son. Okay, he said. We protect her. Monroe nodded, pressed her hands against her belly. Now, let me tell you exactly how Easter morning is going to go. Easter Sunday, 5:30 a.m. Monroe woke before the alarm. The brownstone was silent. Marcello was already gone, had left at 4 a.m. for the port to position his people. Benedetto was with him. Celestina was monitoring communications from a safe house in Bensonhurst. Monroe stood in the kitchen. The same kitchen where she'd caught Tatum and Marcello whispering 6 days ago. She understood that moment now. Marcello had been briefing Tatum on the fake shipment details, feeding her the final piece of disinformation that would send the Ferrantes to Port Newark this morning. And Tatum had been confirming the delivery to Salvatore. Not an affair, an intelligence exchange happening in plain sight. But Monroe hadn't known that then. Oh, hadn't. And the pain of what she'd believed, the 5 months of suspicion, the agony of imagining her husband and her sister entangled, that pain was real. You don't get to unlive something just because the explanation changes. Monroe's phone buzzed. 5:47 a.m. Celestina. Ferrante team mobilizing. 12 vehicles heading toward Port Newark. Salvatore leading. Operation is live. Second buzz. Marcello. We're in position. Stay home. I'll call when it's done. Monroe typed back, I'm not staying home. We discussed this. 3 dots. Then nothing. He knew better than to argue. Monroe drove to Tatum's apartment in Park Slope. This was her role, the one she'd designed herself. While Marcello handled the port, documenting Ferrante operatives walking into an empty trap, Monroe would handle the harder operation. Her sister. She arrived at 6:15 a.m. Easter morning, the streets were empty, churches wouldn't fill for hours. The city existed in that strange, sacred pause between darkness and resurrection. Monroe rang the bell. Tatum answered in a bathrobe, hair loose, face bare. She looked young, unguarded, like the girl Monroe used to share a bed with during thunderstorms. Ro, what are you doing here? Happy Easter, Monroe said. Can I come in? Tatum's apartment was neat, sparse. The home of someone who might need to leave quickly, minimal furniture, no photographs on walls, a suitcase visible in the hallway closet that looked permanently half-packed. Monroe noticed everything now. The details she'd missed for years screamed at her from every corner. They sat at the kitchen table. Tatum made tea, chamomile for Monroe, black for herself. Is everything okay? Tatum asked. You look... I know, Tatum. 2 words, delivered without anger, without drama, just fact. Tatum's hand paused mid-pour, the kettle hovering above the mug, steam rising between them like a question neither wanted to answer. Know what? Everything. Salvatore Ferrante, Eastline Strategic Consulting, the encrypted reports, the shipping manifest you've been passing for 2.5 years. Monroe held her sister's gaze, steady, unblinking. And the intercept where you told Salvatore that my baby would be your leverage point. The kettle touched down on the counter, slowly, controlled. Tatum's training holding even as her world collapsed. Monroe, don't. Don't perform for me. Not today. Not ever again. Tatum's mouth closed. Her eyes shifted, calculating, scanning, running through options the way a trapped animal scans for exits. There are no exits, Monroe said, reading her perfectly. Marcello's people are at the port right now. The shipment you reported to Salvatore doesn't exist. Every Ferrante operative who showed up this morning is being photographed and documented. The FBI gets the package tomorrow. Tatum's face went white. Not performance white. Genuinely bloodless. And Salvatore? We'll be indicted by Tuesday, along with every contact you gave him access to. Here's what I want you to understand about this moment. Monroe could have let Marcello handle Tatum. Could have stayed home. Let the operation swallow her sister the way it was designed to. Clean, clinical, impersonal. She chose to be here instead, sitting across from the woman who betrayed her, looking into the face that mirrored her own, because Monroe understood something fundamental about justice. Justice without compassion is just revenge wearing a better suit. And Monroe Westfield didn't come here for revenge. Why? Monroe asked. The simplest question, the hardest to answer. Tatum stared at the table. Seconds passed, each one heavy enough to bruise. Because they saw me, Tatum finally said. The Ferrantes, Salvatore. They saw me, not your sister, not the other twin, not the quiet one standing behind you at every event. Me. Monroe's chest tightened. I was 26 when Salvatore recruited me. You'd just started dating Marcello. Suddenly everything was about you, Monroe's new boyfriend, Monroe's exciting life, Monroe's powerful husband. Oh, and I was still the girl nobody remembered 5 minutes after leaving the room. So you sold my family to feel visible? I sold information to feel like I existed. Tatum's voice cracked. The first authentic fracture Monroe had heard from her in years. And by the time I realized what I'd become, I was too deep to get out. Salvatore made that clear. Leave and they'd expose me to Marcello. And we both know what that means. Marcello won't hurt you. You don't know that. I do. Because I made it a condition. You walk away breathing. That's the deal I made with your life, Tatum. You're welcome. Tatum broke. Not elegantly, not cinematically. She folded forward a bit over the kitchen table and sobbed with the ugly, gasping desperation of a woman who'd been holding a mask against her face for years and finally let it fall. Monroe watched, didn't reach for her, not yet. The wound was too fresh, the trust too fractured. But she didn't leave either. Monroe's phone buzzed. Marcello, port operation complete. 14 Ferrante operatives documented, Salvatore included. Federal package assembled. It's done. Monroe typed back, Tatum is with me. She's safe. Come home. She set the phone down, looked at her sister. Broken, exposed, stripped of every lie she'd built her identity around. Here's what happens now, Monroe said. You're done with the Ferrantes. Done with Salvatore. Done with consulting and disappearing and using people who love you as cover. They'll come for me. The FBI will have Salvatore in custody by Tuesday. His operation collapses. You become irrelevant to them. And you? Do I become irrelevant to you? Monroe pressed her hands against her belly. The baby rolled. Strong. Alive. Unaware of the war his mother had just won. You're my sister, Monroe said. You will never be irrelevant to me, but you're going to earn your way back. Inch by inch. Truth by truth. And it's going to take a very long time. Tatum looked up, mascara ruined, eyes raw. I'll do whatever it takes, I know you will, because I'm not giving you another option. 4 months later, August. The baby came on a Thursday, August 7th, 3:48 a.m. 6 pounds, 11 ounces, dark hair like his father, wide eyes like his mother, a cry that filled the delivery room like a declaration. I'm here, I'm real, and I'm not afraid of any of you. They named him Nico, not after anyone. Not carrying legacy or expectation or the weight of a family name that came with conditions. Just Nico, clean, new, a name that belonged only to him. Marcello held his son for the first time and went completely still. Not the strategic stillness Monroe had learned to distrust. Something different. Something surrendered. The stillness of a man meeting the one person he couldn't control, couldn't manage, couldn't protect through deception. He's looking at me, Marcello whispered. He's deciding if he trusts you, Monroe said from the bed. Exhausted. Radiant. Don't blow it, Marcello laughed. A real laugh. The kind Monroe hadn't heard since before the second phone, the folder, the operation. Since before their marriage became a chess game played on a board she didn't know existed. That laugh was the first brick in something new. Yes, the months between Easter and August had been the hardest of their marriage, and paradoxically, the most honest. They started therapy 2 weeks after the operation. A counselor in Manhattan named Dr. Odessa Fairbanks, a woman who specialized in high conflict relationships and carried the calm authority of someone who had heard everything and judged nothing. The sessions were brutal. Monroe said things she'd been storing for years, not just about the operation, about the entire architecture of their marriage, the closed doors, the conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, the slow, systematic exclusion from the truth of her own life. You didn't marry me, Monroe told Marcello during their third session. You curated me. You chose what I saw, what I knew, what I was allowed to worry about. That's not partnership. That's exhibition. Marcello absorbed it. Didn't deflect. Didn't justify. You're right, he said. I built a version of our life that kept you safe and kept me in control. And I told myself those were the same thing. They're not. I know that now. Here's the truth I want to leave embedded in your chest. Control is not love. It wears love's clothes, borrows love's language, even mimics love's tenderness. But control always reveals itself in one unmistakable way. It removes the other person's choice. Here's the truth, and I trust you to handle it. Control says, here is the version I've decided you can bear. If someone loves you but won't let you choose, that's not love yet. It's almost love, and almost isn't enough. Marcello kept his promise about the transition. By June, the Valenti operation had been restructured. Celestina oversaw the migration. Every shipping contract, construction deal, and logistics operation moved onto legitimate books. Transparent, auditable, legal. It wasn't instant. Empires don't become clean overnight. But the direction was irreversible. Marcello signed documents that closed accounts, dissolved shell companies, and severed relationships that had existed for 3 generations. Benedetto supported it. Reluctantly at first, then genuinely, after Ginevra told him she was pregnant and he suddenly understood what Monroe had been fighting for. Our children deserve a last name that doesn't come with conditions, Benedetto told Marcello over dinner in July. Marcello nodded, looked at Monroe across the table. They deserve the whole truth, he said, starting now. The Ferrante collapse was swift and total. Federal indictments landed on Easter Monday, exactly as planned. Salvatore Ferrante was arrested at his home in South Philadelphia at 6 a.m. 14 operatives documented at the port were charged with conspiracy, racketeering, and interstate fraud. Nicodemo Ferrante, the patriarch, was indicted 2 weeks later. His organization fractured within a month. Territories dissolved. Alliances evaporated. The empire that had threatened the Valentines for years crumbled under the weight of evidence Monroe's suffering had helped create. She didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. Just the grim satisfaction of knowing that the machine that had consumed her sister was now in pieces. Tatum, the hardest chapter, the longest road. After Easter, Tatum entered a federal witness protection consultation, not because she needed to disappear, but because Persephone negotiated immunity for her cooperation. Full testimony against Salvatore. Complete disclosure of Ferrante operations. In exchange, no charges, no prison. A second chance she hadn't earned, but Monroe had fought for. The sisters didn't speak for 6 weeks after Easter. Monroe needed the silence, needed to exist without performing forgiveness before she actually felt it, needed to wake up in the morning without wondering which version of her sister would call, the real one or the operative. Tatum respected the distance, didn't push, didn't perform. For the first time in years, she simply waited. Without strategy, without agenda, without an angle. It was the most honest thing she'd ever done. Monroe called first, a Wednesday evening in June. I'm sitting on the nursery floor, walls painted sage green, folding onesies that were impossibly small. "I'm not ready to forgive you," Monroe said. "I know, but I'm ready to start trying." Silence, then Tatum's voice. Stripped. Raw, no performance left. "What do you need from me?" "The truth, every time, even when it's ugly, even when you think I can't handle it, especially then." "I promise." "Don't promise, just do it. Promises from you don't carry weight right now. Actions do." "Okay, okay." They rebuilt. Not quickly, not easily. With the painstaking care of two people reassembling something precious from fragments they'd both had a hand in breaking. Tatum met Nico for the first time in July. Monroe watched her sister hold the baby, gently, reverently, almost like she understood that this small life represented everything she'd almost destroyed, and everything she now had the chance to protect honestly. "He has your eyes," Tatum whispered. "He has his own eyes," Monroe corrected. Softly. "Let him be his own person." Tatum nodded, understanding the lesson underneath the words. No more projections. No more using people as mirrors for your own missing pieces. Callaway Breck. Wait, wrong story. Persephone remained Persephone. Fierce. Indispensable. She became Nico's godmother with a speech that lasted 11 seconds. "I will protect this child with litigation, investigation, and if necessary, intimidation." Questions? "No questions," Marcello said. Wisely. October now. Nico was 2 months old. Monroe sat on the brownstone stoop. Brooklyn afternoon. Golden light. The kind of day that doesn't demand anything, just offers itself. Marcello sat beside her, Nico asleep against his chest, one hand supporting the baby's back, the other resting on Monroe's knee. No second phone, no sealed folders, no basement offices with sound-absorbing walls. Just a man, a woman, a boy, and the fragile, hard-won truth between them. "Do you regret it?" Monroe asked. "Any of it?" "I regret every day I kept you in the dark, every decision I made without you. Every morning I woke up next to you carrying secrets you deserve to know. That's a lot of regret. It's a lot of mornings." Monroe leaned against his shoulder, felt Nico's heartbeat. Tiny, steady, brand new. "No more hidden chapters," she said. "No more hidden chapters," he echoed. And sitting on that stoop in the October light, Monroe Westfield understood something she'd been circling her entire life. Trust isn't given once, it's built daily, brick by brick, truth by truth. In every small moment where you choose honesty over comfort and transparency over control. It's not romantic, it's not cinematic, but it's real. And real is enough. Thank you for being here, every single one of you, for sitting with this story and letting it sit with you. If something in Monroe's journey touched you about trust, about sisterhood, about the courage it takes to demand the truth from people who think they're protecting you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment. Tell me what landed. Tell me what you're carrying. This space belongs to all of us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come on now. You stayed for 9 parts. Your family. Make it official. Hit that button. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of your hearts. Demand the truth from the people you love. And never let anyone decide what you can handle. That's your right. Always.